The golden spires of Ethai's city, once proud monuments to Vashari ingenuity, now stood as skeletal reminders of what had been lost. Princess Alara Telvanni moved through the rubble-strewn council chambers, her silver-blue skin luminescent against the ash and destruction that surrounded her. The bombardment had lasted for 3 cycles, leaving little of the capital intact. Her people, those who had survived, huddled in the ancient cave networks beneath the city, their supplies dwindling by the hour. "Your Highness, please reconsider," General Mavic whispered, his usually commanding voice now frail with worry. "The Kordath understand only power. Your sacrifice will mean nothing to them." Alara adjusted the traditional royal sash across her slender shoulders, the ceremonial marks on her face, 3 vertical lines from forehead to chin, glistening with ritual oils. "They've requested an audience. This may be our only chance. To negotiate terms of surrender, not." "My father is dead," Alara cut him off, her violet eyes hardening. "My brothers are dead. I am all that remains of House Telvanni. If my servitude can spare what remains of our people, then duty demands I try." The journey to the Kordath encampment took less than an hour. With each step, Alara rehearsed her proposal: personal servant to Commander Thorin, access to Vashari technology, knowledge of the ancient crystal caves that powered their civilization, all in exchange for the lives of her remaining people. The Kordath war camp sprawled across the plains, their angular ships and weapons pointing skyward like accusatory fingers. Guards escorted her to the command tent, where Commander Thorin sat upon a makeshift throne constructed from salvaged Vashari technology. His gray, scaled skin stretched across a broad frame, eyes like burning coals set in a face designed for intimidation rather than diplomacy. What Alara hadn't expected was the human. He stood to the side, tall and composed in unmarked black attire that contrasted with his earth-toned skin and close-cropped dark hair. His presence was jarring. Humans rarely ventured this far into the outlands. His eyes, a startling blue, followed her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "The last Telvanni comes to beg," Thorin announced, his voice a rumbling bass that filled the tent. "How your ancestors would weep." Alara dropped to one knee, swallowing pride that had been ingrained through generations of royal breeding. "I come to offer terms, Commander." "Terms?" Thorin laughed, the sound like grinding stones. "Your orbital defenses are destroyed, your armies decimated. What terms could you possibly offer?" "Myself," Alara replied, keeping her voice steady. "My knowledge, my service, in exchange for sparing my people." The laughter that followed was expected. The cruel comments from Thorin's officers about how they might use a Vashari princess were not. Alara kept her eyes fixed on the ground, refusing to show how each word landed like a physical blow. "Captain Reed," Thorin addressed the human, "you've observed many conflicts. Is this not pathetic? The mighty Vashari reduced to offering their princess as a concubine." The human, Captain Darius Reed, stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "I've observed that true power isn't measured by how much you can take," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed out of place in the cold command tent, "but by what you're willing to give up." Their eyes met, and in that moment Alara saw something unexpected: respect. "Touching sentiment," Thorin sneered. "But the Galactic Accord sent you to observe, not philosophize. The Vashari resistance ends today with or without their princesses' services." As Thorin signaled for her removal, Captain Reed moved slightly, positioning himself between 2 guards. A subtle movement, but deliberate. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "there's strategic value in clemency. The princess represents intelligence that brute force can't extract." Something in his tone made Alara look up. Behind his diplomatic words, she saw calculation, assessment, and the first flicker of what might have been a plan. "Intelligence," Thorin scoffed. "The Vashari secrets die with their civilization." "Their crystal technology remains unmatched," Reed countered, moving casually around the tent, as if admiring the war trophies that hung from its supports. "The Accord would pay handsomely for that knowledge." Alara watched him with growing curiosity. This human wasn't what she expected. The mercenaries she'd encountered before had been brutal, opportunistic. This one moved with precision, each word and gesture seemingly calculated. "The Accord sent you to document, not negotiate," Thorin growled. Reed shrugged, his hand resting casually near what Alara now recognized as a concealed weapon. "I'm simply offering perspective. The princess could be valuable, alive, and cooperative." A tense silence followed. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs as Thorin's burning gaze shifted between her and the human. Finally, the commander waved dismissively. "Take her to the holding area. I'll consider her. Offer." Two guards grabbed Alara's arms, their clawed hands digging into her flesh. As they dragged her toward the tent's exit, she caught Reed's eye once more. A nearly imperceptible nod passed between them, a silent communication she couldn't fully decipher but instinctively understood. Outside, twilight had fallen over the encampment. The twin moons of Vashar were rising, casting a pale blue glow over the desolation. The guards marched her past rows of captured Vashari citizens, their once-proud faces now hollow with defeat. Alara strengthened her resolve. Whatever happened to her, it would be worth it if her people survived. They reached a small detention area, a hastily constructed pen surrounded by energy barriers. As one guard deactivated a section to push her inside, a commotion erupted from the main command area. Shouts and the sudden whine of energy weapons filled the air. The guards turned, momentarily distracted. In that instant, a shadow moved behind them. Captain Reed appeared, moving with lethal efficiency. 2 precise strikes and both guards collapsed unconscious. "We have approximately 3 minutes before they realize you're not where you're supposed to be," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Do you want to save your people, Princess?" Alara stared at him, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "Why would you help me?" His blue eyes softened slightly. "Because you don't need to surrender," he extended his hand. "You need an ally." Alara stared at the human's outstretched hand, time seeming to slow around them. The sounds of the Kordath camp, the hum of energy barriers, distant shouts, the rhythmic pulse of war machinery, all faded into the background. For 3 heartbeats, she hesitated. "Why should I trust you?" she whispered, violet eyes narrowing. "Humans have never involved themselves in outland conflicts unless there was profit to be made." "Fair assessment," Reed replied, his hand still extended. "But right now, I'm your only option that doesn't end with you as Thorin's trophy and your people exterminated." A distant alarm began to wail. Reed glanced over his shoulder. "Decision time, Princess." Alara took his hand. They moved swiftly between storage units and transport vessels, Reed leading her through the sprawling encampment with surprising familiarity. When Kordath patrols passed, he pulled her into shadows, his body shielding hers, his breath warm against her neck. Despite the danger, Alara found herself acutely aware of his proximity. The strange heat humans radiated, the unfamiliar scent of him, earthy and alien. "How do you know the camp layout?" she asked when they paused behind a fuel depot. "I've been here 3 weeks," he replied, checking a small device on his wrist. "The Accord may have sent me to observe, but I never specified what I'd be observing." They reached the perimeter. Beyond the final sensor barriers lay the dark expanse of the Vashari Plains, and beyond that, the foothills where scattered resistance fighters still held out. Reed produced a small device and aimed it at the nearest sensor post. "I wasn't always a neutral observer," he explained, manipulating controls on the device. 8 years with Earth's Special Tactical Division, another 5 as a private contractor. I've seen enough wars to know when one side isn't fighting fair. The sensor's lights flickered and died. Reed motioned her forward, and they slipped through the gap in the perimeter. "Why help me?" Alara pressed as they put distance between themselves and the camp. "What do you gain?" Reed's pace didn't slow. "Let's get somewhere safe first, questions later." They traveled through the night, the twin moons lighting their path across the plains. Reed moved with confidence, occasionally consulting his wrist device. After several hours, they reached a narrow crevice in the foothills that widened into a small cave. Inside, Alara was surprised to find basic supplies, water, nutrition packs, communication equipment, and weapons. "You've been planning this," she said, realization dawning. Reed activated a small heating unit. "Not this specifically, but I like having exit strategies." He offered her a container of water, which she accepted gratefully. As she drank, he busied himself with the communication equipment, sending a quick encrypted burst transmission. "The Kordath violated 16 separate provisions of the Galactic Accord," he said finally, sitting across from her. "Banned weapons, civilian targeting, resource pillaging, the list goes on." "And yet your Accord did nothing," Alara replied bitterly. "Politics," Reed's mouth twisted. "Earth wants Kordath trade routes. The Centauri need their mineral rights. Nobody wants to risk war with the Kordeth Empire over a small outland civilization. So why risk yourself? Reed was silent for a moment. I've seen this pattern before on Earth, on Vega Prime, strong civilizations deciding weaker ones don't deserve to exist. His blue eyes met hers. Someone needs to break the pattern. Alara studied him, searching for deception and finding none. What's your plan, Captain Reed? Darius, he corrected. And I don't have a complete plan yet, but I have training, equipment, and contacts. Your people have knowledge of the terrain and motivation. Together, we might stand a chance. Against an entire Kordeth battle fleet. We don't need to defeat their fleet. We need to make this occupation too costly to maintain. He leaned forward. The Kordeth only understand strength, so we show them strength, just not the kind they expect. For the first time in weeks, Alara felt something other than despair, a dangerous spark of hope. Guerrilla tactics. My ancestors used similar methods during the first migration. Darius nodded. We start small, disrupt supply lines, sabotage communications, build a network, then. Why should my people trust you? She interrupted. Why should I? Darius held her gaze steadily. I don't expect trust immediately, I'll earn it. Something in his voice, a quiet conviction, made Alara believe him, or perhaps she simply needed to believe someone. She lifted her chin, decision made. There's a resistance cell in the northern caves. Survivors from the Royal Guard and civilian volunteers, if we can reach them. We'll start there, Darius agreed. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting rose-gold light across the plains, they prepared to move out. Darius offered Alara a compact energy pistol, handle first. Can you use this? Alara took the weapon, her slender blue fingers wrapping around the grip with practiced ease. I am Vashari royalty, Captain Reed. We are not just diplomats and scholars. A smile tugged at his lips, the first she'd seen from him. Darius, he reminded her. Darius, she echoed, the human name strange on her tongue. As they exited the cave, Alara glanced back at the distant silhouette of the once majestic Ethai city, now reduced to smoldering ruins. Her home, her responsibility. She turned to find Darius watching her, something unreadable in his expression. We will take it back, he said softly, understanding in his eyes. Alara nodded, a new resolve hardening within her. The princess who had knelt before Thorin was gone. In her place stood a woman ready to fight, not surrender. Together, they set off toward the northern caves, an unlikely alliance forged in the shadow of destruction, built on fragile trust and desperate hope. The northern caves sprawled beneath the Vashari highlands like a labyrinth, their crystalline walls glowing with faint bioluminescence. 3 days had passed since their escape from the Kordeth camp. 3 days of careful movement, avoiding patrols, and surviving on minimal rations. 3 days of Alara and Darius learning to navigate not just the treacherous terrain, but each other. We're close, Alara whispered, her fingers tracing ancient Vashari symbols etched into the cave wall. These are royal markers. My ancestors used them during the Cataclysm Wars. Darius nodded, visibly impressed. Your people have survived extinction before. Many times, she confirmed, the Vashari endure. They rounded a corner and found themselves facing the business end of a dozen energy rifles, held by gaunt Vashari soldiers whose once pristine armor now bore battle scars and hasty repairs. Princess Alara, a tall female officer, stepped forward, disbelief coloring her features. We thought you were captured, or worse. Commander Vila, Alara greeted her. I was nearly both. This is Captain Darius Reed. He's the reason I'm standing here. All weapons immediately shifted to target Darius. Commander Vila's eyes narrowed. A human, working with the Kordeth. Working against them, Darius corrected calmly, despite the weapons trained on him. The Galactic Accord sent me to document. My conscience demanded I do more. Alara moved between Darius and the weapons. He saved my life, and he brings skills we desperately need. Reluctantly, Commander Vila signaled her troops to lower their weapons. The Council will want to speak with you both. They were led deeper into the cave network, through passages that widened into larger chambers. Refugees huddled in family groups, their possessions reduced to whatever they could carry when fleeing. Children with haunted eyes watched them pass. Makeshift medical stations treated the wounded with dwindling supplies. Darius took it all in, his expression somber but analytical. Alara could almost see him cataloging needs, assessing capabilities, formulating strategies. The Resistance Council, comprised of surviving military officers, government officials, and civilian leaders, received them in a chamber dominated by a holographic map of the region. Expressions of joy at seeing their princess alive quickly gave way to skepticism when Darius explained his proposal. Guerrilla tactics, General Mavic scoffed. Against Cordeth battle technology, we're scholars and diplomats, not insurgents. With respect, General, Darius replied, you're already insurgents. The question is whether you'll be effective ones. He moved to the holographic map, manipulating it with surprising familiarity. The Cordeth have established their main base here, with secondary outposts along these lines. Their supply chains are extended and vulnerable. Their communications rely on relays that can be disrupted. And you know this how? A council member demanded. Because I spent 3 weeks in their camp observing exactly these details, Darius answered without hesitation. And because I've fought similar campaigns on 4 different worlds. He speaks truth, Alara interjected. I've seen his intelligence firsthand. She stepped forward, her royal presence commanding attention. Our traditional warfare failed against the Cordeth. We must adapt or perish. A tense silence followed. Finally, Commander Vila spoke. What exactly do you propose, human? For the next 2 hours, Darius outlined his strategy. Small, coordinated strikes against vulnerable targets, disruption of supply lines, communications interference, and most importantly, training the Vashari to fight in ways the Cordeth wouldn't expect. We don't need to defeat their army, he concluded. We need to make occupation so costly they choose to leave. Reluctantly, the council agreed to a trial mission. Darius would train a small team to attack a Cordeth communications relay, with Alara accompanying as royal observer. The training began the following day. 20 Vashari volunteers, a mix of military personnel and civilians with combat potential, gathered in a large cavern that Darius had converted into a makeshift training ground. Forget everything you know about conventional warfare, he told them. We are not fighting fair, we are fighting to survive. Alara watched from the sidelines as Darius transformed from observer to leader. He taught them Earth military hand signals, close-quarters combat techniques, and improvised explosive tactics. He adapted human military strategy to Vashari physiology, taking advantage of their natural agility and heightened senses. You're good at this, Alara commented during a rare break. They sat apart from the others, sharing a meal of synthesized protein. Teaching or fighting? Darius asked. Both. He shrugged. I've had practice. How many wars have you seen? She asked softly. Darius was quiet for a moment. Too many, all different, all the same. His blue eyes met hers. The strong taking from the weak. And which are we? Alara challenged. Strong or weak? Neither. His gaze intensified. The Vashari aren't weak, just outgunned, and the Cordeth aren't strong, just bullies with better weapons. Alara studied him, this human enigma who fought others' battles. Why do you care what happens to my people? Darius looked away, his focus seemingly on the training Vashari, but his mind clearly elsewhere. On Earth, there's an old saying, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And you consider yourself good. There was no challenge in her voice, only curiosity. I consider myself someone who can't do nothing. He turned back to her, something vulnerable crossing his features. Not anymore. The moment stretched between them, intimate despite the cavern full of people. Alara felt a strange, fluttering sensation in her chest, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. That night after training had concluded, Alara found Darius alone, studying the maps and making notes. The first mission is tomorrow, she said, sitting beside him. The council wants me to wish you luck. Just the council, a hint of teasing in his voice. Alara hesitated, unaccustomed to the way this human disrupted her usual composure. I wish to accompany you. Darius looked up sharply. That wasn't the agreement. I'm modifying the agreement. Her chin lifted in that regal manner that brooked no argument. My people need to see their princess fighting, not hiding. It's dangerous. So is surrender. Alara held his gaze. You taught me that. A slow smile spread across Darius's face, a real one that reached his eyes. So I did. They worked late into the night, finalizing plans. As exhaustion set in, they found themselves sitting closer, voices lowered, the mission plans gradually becoming secondary to the stories they exchanged. Alara told him of Vashari culture, the golden age before the Kordath came. Darius shared tales of Earth and the far-flung colonies he'd visited. When they finally parted to rest before the mission, Darius caught her hand briefly. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Princess, I'm glad I found you in that tent." Alara felt warmth spread through her at his touch. "I have a name, you know, not just a title." "Alara," he said softly, as if testing the feel of it on his tongue. She smiled. "Sleep well, Darius Reed. Tomorrow we become the resistance they will remember for generations." Neither spoke of the growing tension between them, the glances that lasted too long, the unnecessary touches, the way they gravitated toward each other in any room. There would be time for that, or there wouldn't. War had a way of making every moment both precious and precarious, a lesson they both understood all too well. Dawn hadn't yet broken when Darius led the strike team from the caves. 20 Vashari fighters moved silently through the highlands, their naturally luminescent skin dimmed with tactical pigmentation. Alara moved among them, no longer a princess but a soldier, her royal garments exchanged for combat attire. "Relay station is 2 clicks southeast," Darius whispered, consulting his tactical display. 2 perimeter guards, 4 technicians inside, minimal security because they think the Vashari resistance is broken. "They'll learn otherwise today," Alara replied, checking her energy pistol. They positioned themselves on the ridgeline overlooking the relay station, a spindly tower surrounded by power generators and communication equipment. From this vantage point, they could see the 2 Kordath guards patrolling the perimeter, their scaled forms moving with military precision. Darius signaled to a pair of Vashari scouts who had once been hunters in the highlands. They moved forward with fluid grace, using the terrain for cover. What followed was a masterclass in stealth, the guards neutralized without a sound, their bodies hidden before the change in patrol patterns could be noticed. "First phase complete," Darius murmured into his comm unit. "Moving to second phase." Alara touched his arm. "I should lead the second team." His eyes flashed concern. "That wasn't the plan." "The plan needs a royal presence," she insisted. "My people need to see this isn't just your victory." After a moment's hesitation, Darius nodded. "Stay behind Commander Vila if anything goes wrong." "It won't," Alara assured him, though they both knew such promises were hollow in combat. Their fingers brushed briefly, a touch too deliberate to be accidental, too brief to acknowledge. Then Alara was moving, leading her team toward the southern entrance while Darius took his group east. The synchronized attack unfolded with precision that would have impressed even Vashari military academies. The technicians inside were subdued before they could trigger alarms. Within minutes, the relay station was under resistance control. Darius worked quickly, uploading a virus into the Kordath communication network, while Vashari technicians placed explosive charges at strategic points. "This will blind their southeastern operations for at least 3 cycles," he explained as they worked. "Every patrol will need to report in person rather than via comlink." "Creating gaps we can exploit," Alara nodded, understanding the strategy. "Exactly." There was pride in his voice, not for himself, but for how quickly she grasped military concepts. They were preparing to withdraw when the proximity sensors Darius had placed gave a warning chirp. A Kordath patrol, unscheduled and unexpected, was approaching from the north. "Accelerate the timeline," Darius ordered. "Everyone out southeast route now." The team moved with disciplined urgency, but the Kordath patrol had veered unexpectedly, cutting off their escape route. Hidden behind a rock formation, Darius assessed their options. "They'll spot us if we move," he whispered, "and the charges are set to detonate in 3 minutes." Alara made a quick decision. "I'll create a diversion, northwest away from our escape route." "Too dangerous," Darius objected. "Better 1 at risk than 20, she countered. Before he could stop her, she slipped away, moving to a position where she would be visible to the patrol but far from the team's escape path. When she fired her energy pistol into the air, the reaction was immediate. The Kordath patrol turned toward the disturbance, charging in her direction. Alara led them on a weaving chase through the rocky terrain, using her knowledge of Vashari highlands to stay just ahead of her pursuers. The rest of the team escaped unseen. The relay station exploded right on schedule, the fireball momentarily distracting the Kordath soldiers. But Alara found herself cut off, hemmed in by rocky cliffs with the patrol closing in. Just as the first Kordath soldier rounded the corner, weapons raised, a shadow dropped from above. Darius attacked with lethal efficiency, neutralizing 2 soldiers before the others could react. Alara joined the fight, her royal combat training evident in every precise shot and movement. Together, they eliminated the threat, but not before a Kordath blade sliced deep across Darius's ribs. He stumbled, pressing a hand to the wound as dark blood seeped between his fingers. "You were supposed to escape with the others," Alara scolded, helping him into a sheltered alcove where they could assess the damage. "And let the princess have all the fun," he grimaced, trying for humor despite the pain. "Not a chance." The wound was deep, but had missed vital organs. Alara applied field medicine from her pack, her fingers gentle despite her agitation. "That was a reckless plan," Darius murmured as she worked. "I believe the human phrase is pot calling the kettle black," she replied, bandaging his torso. "You didn't need to come back for me." His hand caught hers, stilling her movements. "Yes, I did." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them, fear and relief and something deeper neither had acknowledged. The tiny alcove suddenly felt even smaller, their faces inches apart. "Darius," she whispered, his name like a question. He answered by closing the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that carried the urgency of battle and the tenderness of something neither had expected to find in war. Her silver-blue skin illuminated softly in response to the surge of emotion, casting a gentle glow over them both. When they broke apart, breathing unsteadily, Alara rested her forehead against his. "That was long overdue," he finished for her. They made their way back to the resistance base under cover of darkness, moving slowly due to Darius's injury. The success of their mission had preceded them, the first real victory against the Kordath since the invasion began. The caverns were alive with cautious celebration when they arrived. Resistance fighters shared stories of the mission, each telling growing slightly more dramatic with each retelling. Supplies captured from the relay station were inventoried and distributed. Strategies for future targets were already being discussed. In the medical chamber, as a Vashari healer treated Darius's wound more thoroughly, Alara sat beside him, their shoulders touching. "The Council wants to expand operations," she told him quietly. 3 more teams, 3 more targets." "Good," he nodded. "Keep the pressure on, don't let them recover." "You've changed my people," Alara observed, "given them back their pride." Darius shook his head. "They always had pride, I just reminded them how to use it as a weapon." Later, alone in the small chamber that had been designated as her quarters, Alara was surprised by a soft knock. Darius stood in the doorway, his bandaged torso partially visible beneath a loose shirt. "You should be resting," she chided. "I needed to see you," he replied simply. "Today, when I thought you might," he stopped, seeming unable to finish the thought. Alara drew him inside, closing the door. "I'm still here." This time when they came together, there was no battle adrenaline to blame, no near-death urgency to explain away the hunger in their touch. His hands traced the luminescent patterns on her skin while hers explored the unfamiliar terrain of his body, the scars from other wars, the strength built over years of combat. "Are we being foolish?" she whispered against his shoulder. "A human and a Vashari." "Probably," he admitted, his fingers tangling in her silvery hair. "But I've never been known for my wisdom." She laughed softly, "Nor I for my caution." They came together slowly, learning each other's bodies in the gentle blue glow cast by her skin. The differences between them, temperature, texture, anatomy, only heightened the intimacy of their exploration. When he finally entered her, the sensation was unlike anything either had experienced, their physiological differences creating unexpected pleasures. Afterward, as they lay tangled together on her narrow bed, Darius traced the ceremonial markings on her face with gentle fingertips. "When this is over," he began, then faltered. "What happens then?" She finished for him the question they'd both avoided. Darius sighed. "I don't know, I'm a human mercenary, your Vashari royalty." "Perhaps we'll build something new," Alara suggested, pressing closer to his warmth. "When we've taken back what's ours." Neither mentioned the greater obstacle, the war they might not survive. Instead, they held each other until sleep claimed them, finding brief sanctuary in each other's arms while outside their door, plans for the next day's battle took shape. The resistance had begun in earnest, fueled by hope, led by an unlikely pair whose differences had become their greatest strength. Whether that strength would be enough remained to be seen. 3 weeks of relentless guerrilla warfare had transformed the Vashari resistance from a desperate band of survivors into a formidable fighting force. Supply depots raided, communication networks sabotaged, Kordath patrols ambushed. Each victory, however small, kindled the flames of hope among the Vashari people. In the command center, a large cavern now filled with salvaged Kordath technology and holographic tactical displays. Alara stood beside Darius as they briefed the council on their most ambitious plan yet. The Kordath battle cruiser Dominion has descended to the surface, Darius explained, manipulating the holographic display to show the massive vessel now grounded near the ruins of Ethai's city. Commander Thorin has relocated his command center inside it. Why would he ground his most powerful ship? General Mavic asked, suspicion evident in his voice. Fuel concerns, Darius replied. Our attacks on their supply convoys have been effective. They're conserving resources. Or it's a trap, Commander Vila suggested. Alara stepped forward. Either way, it presents an opportunity. The Dominion contains the central database for all Kordath operations in this sector, if we could access it. We could obtain their complete battle plans, force deployments, and communications protocols, Darius finished. Everything we need to coordinate a planet-wide counteroffensive. The chamber fell silent as the council members exchanged glances, weighing the enormous risk against the potential reward. How would you get inside? Mavic finally asked. The Dominion will be heavily guarded. Darius's expression hardened. I'll go alone. My Accord credentials might still grant me access. No, Alara said firmly, her hand brushing his. What had begun as a tentative alliance had deepened over the past weeks into something neither had expected, something precious and fierce that they protected in stolen moments between missions. We go together. Their eyes met in silent communication, a language developed through battle and intimacy. After a moment, Darius nodded. A small team then, 4 of us. Any more would attract attention. The council deliberated briefly before approving the mission. As they left the chamber, Alara pulled Darius into a secluded alcove, her luminescent skin casting soft blue patterns across his face. You were planning to go alone, she accused, though there was more worry than anger in her voice. If Thorin captures you... He won't, she pressed her palm against his cheek. We lead together, remember, that was our agreement. He covered her hand with his own. Agreements can be renegotiated when circumstances change. What circumstances? His blue eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch. When one party realizes they can't bear to lose the other. The admission hung between them, weightier than any they had shared in the darkness of her quarters. Alara's glow brightened in response to her emotions, illuminating the small space around them. Then you understand why I won't let you go alone, she whispered. Later that night, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, their bodies cooling from shared passion, Darius traced the ceremonial markings on her shoulder with gentle fingers. Tell me again about the rebuilding ceremony, he murmured against her skin. Alara smiled, enjoying how fascinated he was by Vashari traditions. After great conflicts, the surviving houses gather at the crystal spire. Each brings an offering from their lands, water, soil, crystal fragments. These are combined in the ancestral bowl, symbolizing how separate elements become stronger when united. And then, the ruler speaks the ancient words of renewal, drinks from the bowl, and passes it to their closest ally. She shifted to look into his eyes. It's more than ceremony. It's a promise to build something better from the ashes of conflict. Darius was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. What happens when this is over, Alara, if we succeed? The question they had both avoided now lay between them, impossible to ignore. I am the last Telvanni, she said softly. My duty is to my people. I know, his voice held no resentment, only understanding. And mine is to the Accord. Alara propped herself up on one elbow. Is it? You've broken numerous Accord protocols helping us. A smile tugged at his lips. True, my career as a neutral observer is probably over. Stay, she whispered, the word carrying the weight of everything unsaid between them. Help us rebuild. Instead of answering, he drew her down for a kiss that felt like both promise and farewell. Neither slept much that night, each memorizing the other's touch as if it might be their last chance. Dawn found them approaching the Dominion, accompanied by Commander Vila and a Vashari technical specialist named Tavik. They wore salvaged Kordath patrol uniforms, their features concealed by tactical helmets. Remember, Darius instructed as they neared the massive ship's ground-level access port, walk with purpose, act like you belong. His Accord identification, combined with their disguises, got them through the first security checkpoint. The interior of the Dominion was a maze of corridors and chambers, all angular metal and harsh lighting that felt oppressive after weeks in the luminescent Vashari caves. They navigated toward the main data core, avoiding patrols when possible, neutralizing them silently when necessary. Tavik worked quickly at each security junction, his technical skills allowing them to progress deeper into the ship. They were 2 levels away from the data core when alarms suddenly blared throughout the vessel. We've been compromised, Vila hissed. No, Darius's expression darkened as he consulted his tactical display. It's not us. The ship is preparing for launch. Ilara's eyes widened. They're retreating. Or repositioning for a final assault. Darius made a quick decision. Change of plans. Vila, Tavik, proceed to the data core, extract what you can, then get out. Ilara and I will create a diversion. Where? Ilara asked as they split from the others. The bridge. Determination hardened his features. It's time I had another chat with Commander Thorin. They fought their way upward through the ship, their disguises now useless as they engaged in direct combat with Kordath security forces. Ilara moved with lethal grace, her royal combat training evident in every precise shot and movement. Beside her, Darius was a force of calculated violence, his human combat style contrasting with but complementing her own. They reached the bridge access corridor just as the ship's engines began their warm-up sequence, the deck vibrating beneath their feet. Whatever happens, Darius said, pausing before the final push, know that meeting you is worth everything that follows. Ilara's heart constricted. This isn't goodbye. His smile was gentle. Of course not. They breached the bridge together. In the chaos that followed, they separated, Darius engaging Thorin in brutal hand-to-hand combat while Ilara secured the perimeter, eliminating bridge officers before they could organize a counterattack. The human observer, Thorin snarled, his massive scaled form looming over Darius. I should have killed you when you first arrived. Probably, Darius agreed, circling the commander cautiously. But then, underestimating others seems to be your specialty. Their combat was vicious, Thorin's tremendous strength against Darius's speed and technique. Across the bridge, Ilara finished securing their position and moved to assist, but found herself engaged with the last remaining security officer. She didn't see the moment when Thorin landed a devastating blow, sending Darius crashing into a control panel. She only heard the commander's triumphant roar as he advanced on the downed human, energy blade humming with deadly intent. Your interference ends now, human, Thorin growled. After I finish you, the princess will watch as I turn her precious highlands to glass. Ilara dispatched her opponent and turned, horror filling her as she saw Darius struggling to rise, blood streaming from a wound at his temple. Thorin loomed over him, blade raised for a killing strike. Without hesitation, she charged across the bridge, firing her energy pistol repeatedly. The shots impacted Thorin's armored back, staggering but not stopping him. He turned, his burning eyes fixing on her with murderous rage. The princess herself, he snarled. How convenient. What followed was a desperate struggle. Ilara emptied her weapon into Thorin, but the commander's battle armor absorbed much of the damage. He advanced on her, seemingly unstoppable, his massive form backing her against the bridge viewport. Your sacrifice was meaningless, he hissed, reaching for her throat. Your people will still die. A shadow moved behind Thorin. Darius, bloodied but upright, drove his combat blade deep into a gap in the commander's armor, the vulnerable junction where neck met shoulder. Thorin roared in pain and fury, releasing Ilara to turn on this new threat. It was the opening she needed. Alara snatched Thorin's fallen energy blade and with all her strength drove it through his chest. The commander staggered, disbelief crossing his reptilian features as he looked down at the weapon protruding from his body. "The Vashari aren't weak," Alara said quietly. "We were just waiting for the right ally." Thorin collapsed, his massive form shuddering once before going still. In the sudden silence, Alara rushed to Darius, who had slumped against a control panel. His breathing was labored, but his eyes were clear as they found hers. "The data core?" he asked. As if on cue, Vila's voice came through their communication devices. "Mission accomplished. We have the data. Extraction route secured." Relief washed over Alara. She helped Darius to his feet, supporting him as they made their way from the bridge. "We need to hurry. The ship's launch sequence is still active." "Wait," Darius moved to the navigation console. "One last gift for the Cordeth Empire." His fingers moved across the controls, reprogramming the ship's trajectory. "Let's send the Dominion into the sun, a fitting end for their flagship." They escaped minutes before the massive vessel lifted off, its systems locked on a course toward Vashar's star. From the highlands, they watched as it dwindled to a point of light against the dawn sky. "The Cordeth will retaliate," Vila warned as they regrouped with the resistance forces. "Their command structure is in disarray," Darius replied, "and we have their complete battle plans. For the first time, we have the advantage." 3 months later, the last Cordeth transport lifted off from Vashari soil. The cost had been high, entire regions lay in ruins, thousands had been lost, but the Vashari remained unbroken. The resistance, armed with Cordeth tactical data and led by the unexpected partnership of a human warrior and a Vashari princess, had made occupation too costly to maintain. In the partially restored Grand Hall of Ethai's city, Alara stood before her people, wearing the traditional robes of leadership. The rebuilding ceremony was about to begin, symbolizing the transition from war to renewal. Her eyes searched the assembled crowd until they found Darius, standing quietly at the back. Unlike the Vashari around him, he wore simple Earth attire, the uniform of an Accord observer, his official role now reinstatement. Their gazes locked across the distance. 3 weeks had passed since the final battle. 3 weeks of rebuilding, of planning, of painful awareness that their paths were diverging. He had received his recall orders from the Accord the previous day. Alara began the ceremony, her voice steady as she recited the ancient words of renewal. Attendants brought forward the ancestral bowl, filled with offerings from each surviving house. As tradition demanded, she drank first, then paused, the bowl held before her. According to custom, she should pass it to her closest ally among the Vashari noble houses. Instead, her eyes found Darius again. "Captain Darius Reed," she called, her voice echoing through the hall. "Step forward." A murmur passed through the assembly as Darius approached, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes never left hers. "The Vashari honor their allies," Alara announced, "but some are more than allies." She held out the bowl to him. It was unprecedented, a human participating in the sacred ceremony. Darius understood the significance as he accepted it, taking a ceremonial sip before returning it to her. When the ceremony concluded, they found themselves alone in a quiet antechamber, the sounds of celebration muted by thick crystal walls. "Your ship leaves tomorrow," Alara said, stating what they both knew. Darius nodded. "The Accord wants a complete report." "And then—" He stepped closer, the formal distance between them dissolving. "And then I resign my commission." Hope flared in Alara's eyes. "What about your duty to the Accord?" "Some duties are temporary," he replied, taking her hands in his. "Others last a lifetime." "The Vashari have never had a human consort to their ruler," she warned, though her luminescence brightened with emotion. "The Vashari have never defeated the Cordeth Empire either," he countered. "Perhaps it's time for new traditions." "There will be opposition," Alara cautioned, "from both our peoples." Darius smiled, tracing the ceremonial markings on her face with gentle fingers. "Good thing we're experienced in fighting against the odds." He drew her closer, their foreheads touching in the intimate gesture they had come to share. "You once offered yourself to save your people," he whispered. "Now I offer myself to help you lead them." Alara's answer was to kiss him, her silver blue skin illuminating the chamber around them with the intensity of her joy. Outside, the twin moons of Vashar rose over a world forever changed, a world where sacrifice had led not to surrender, but to unexpected strength. A world where the most powerful alliances were forged not through duty or necessity, but through the most unexpected force of all, love that transcended the stars themselves.